Hey guys, welcome to today's video. I want to take our time today and kind of think back on this previous year, our first year full-time farming. When I say farming, we're growing plants out here. We're a nursery. It's our first year doing this full-time, and I want to share with you some pointers that we have learned this year that are some things that be really valuable for somebody to know who was considering diving headlong into something like this. So some of these we've kind of learned just kind of from doing this year and trial and error, but we're learning from all of this, and we're building kind of a knowledge base on how not to mess these same things up again next year. Or maybe it's just some things that we've done along the way that have worked out really, really well. So I'm looking forward to sharing some pointers with you guys, and this is what we've learned in our first year. The first pointer that I'd really like to share is to beware of paralysis analysis. Now you guys know what I mean when I say that. I mean analyzing everything to the point of you being unable to act. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you want to start a nursery and you've got 2 acres to work with. Now, you start planning and thinking about what you're going to do with those 2 acres, and you read and you watch video after video and you study everything you can get your hands on, and you wind up with probably more questions than you have answers. You're learning some things, but what I would encourage you to do is to try to narrow your focus down to maybe one thing that you want to start on and start figuring out how to do that thing really well. Don't worry about your 2 acres. Worry about 200 square feet. How can you get everything you can out of 200 square feet before you even think about 1,000 square feet, or before you think about 10,000 square feet, or before you move up to a 40,000 square foot acre? I mean, don't even worry about the acreage. Don't even worry about how you're going to fill up all of this space and what you're going to do with it until you first learn how to manage something small. You get overwhelmed when you think about too much and think you have to know too much before you can take a few action steps to get started. So you don't have to know very much, or you don't have to have a very complete vision yet in order to just take a very few first steps to get started. So don't spend too much time overthinking something that's really not all that hard. A second pointer that I would give you on a farm, in a nursery business, is that carelessness kills. Now, I am very well known and well documented by not being great with details and sometimes flying by the seat of my pants and not really planning things out well. But let me just tell you that in a nursery, in a farm type setting, you cannot afford, and when I say afford, I mean financially you can't afford it, and the success of your business will not be able to stand it, but you cannot stand to be careless. Let me just give you a couple examples of what I mean by this. One example of how you could be careless in a nursery environment is thinking that you can always do something later. So, for example, last year I waited until too late in the spring to order a certain shipment of perennials that I thought that I would just be able to get. I just figured, well, I want them in April, so I'll be able to get them in April, so I'll call them in April and they'll ship them in April. It doesn't work that way. All it would have taken, though, is me making that phone call a couple of months earlier in the year just to find out what the situation was, or just making a phone call and saying, when do I need to order these in order to have them on this day? When do I need to order them? Other ways that you can be careless is making assumptions about your equipment when your weather gets extreme. So let's say that it's gotten extremely hot. Penny said, I'm not hot. Let's say that it's gotten extremely hot where you are, and perhaps your plants need an extra cycle of irrigation because of that. Well, you've just assumed that because you've ran your sprinklers for 15 minutes all spring, that 15 minutes is still going to be enough come July when it's 100 degrees outside, and you just got careless. You didn't check on your plants. You didn't check on your moisture levels, and you just assumed. Well, you can't be careless or you will have dead plants. You can't assume anything when you're dealing with perishable products, things that you're growing. You just can't automatically think that just because it was this way last week or this way last year, that that's automatically going to carry through every single time. So, every time you're putting your hands into a new project or you're kind of moving into a new season, as much as is possible, think ahead about what things could go wrong, or what do I need to do to assure that things go well. And while you can never account for every single contingency, you can account for an awful lot of them. And thinking ahead and keeping yourself engaged in what you're doing is absolutely critical. A third pointer that'd be worth mentioning is always seek to see the big picture. Now, what I mean when I say the big picture is what's going on in front of you today and what's going to be going on, or what needs to be happening in order for you to be successful in a year and 2 years and 3 years down the road. Now, how do you know that you're seeing the big picture? What are some indicators of that? I know that I'm seeing the big picture, maybe not the whole complete picture, but I know that I'm seeing the big picture because right now I have more irrigation and space than I can use. I have more pots than I need. I have more baby plants right now than I've got time or resources to pot. So just some of these things that show that you're planning ahead. You're not just worried about what's happening right now. You know, you always want some mature, nice size, ready to sell plants that could be sold at any time, and you always want to make sure that you got a lot of babies coming also. Don't get too hung up on the present season, although it's extremely important, it matters, and it's when you're making your money. But also, you got to be looking down the road all the time. Let's say that it's early spring. Are you already thinking about selling mums in the fall? Or it's winter right now. It's the middle of January, late January. Now, what am I doing and what am I thinking about in my nursery today that indicates that I'm a season and 2 seasons ahead, looking down the road, because these things creep up on you, and because you're dealing with items in my business, plants, they take time to grow. And if I want to have something to sell next year, I got to be growing it this year. So you always have to be working every day and every season with the next season in mind. Big picture in mind while you're in the current season. Another helpful pointer, do not overreact to difficulties. You're going to have difficulties. You're going to have problems. You're going to walk up in your nursery, you're going to step out your back door onto your farm one day, and you're going to see something that it's going to rock you for a minute. You're going to open the back door and the cows are going to be out, or you're going to open the door and walk outside and you're going to have a busted water line with a geyser, or you know, somebody's driving down the road in front of your house and they've crashed into your sign and torn it down, or you're going to have a crop of plants that die. I mean, things happen in farming. One of the things that you've got to be able to do as a business owner in the agriculture or horticulture world is you got to be able to regulate your emotional health and your ability to not flip out when something goes wrong. It's absolutely certain that things are going to go wrong. Something's not going to sell as well as you thought it would. Prices in the market are going to drop. You know, just this week, we looked out the window one morning it was about 9 o'clock, and we had a water line that had just exploded, and we had a geyser that was shooting, 20 feet into the air because one of my water lines, I failed to drain it. I thought I got them all, but I didn't, and it was a huge mess. And you just have to be able to deal with the issues that come up. There are things that are going to disappoint you. You thought you were going to make more money than you did. You thought something was going to be cheaper than it was. You thought the weather was going to be better this week than it turned out to be. There's all kinds of things that are potential problems for those who are seeking to grow something for their business, whether it's plants or animals or it's a crop or whatever it is. You are going to have to be able to handle difficulties without losing your mind. Without getting too deep into the weeds with this, when you lose your ability to think clearly and you're overly emotional, you're going to create problems in your family. You're going to create unnecessary drama with your customers. You're going to be prone to making all sorts of bad decisions, and you have got to calm down. Every part of life, it serves you well. In business, particularly so. So let me encourage you, just kind of take stock of that in your life and be able to get yourself under control and think clearly when things don't go right, because there are going to be times when they don't. Another pointer that I'd like to share with you, and sometimes thinking about this makes me laugh and sometimes it makes me want to scream, but really helpful to know, is you need to overestimate how long you think it's going to take to do everything. Let's take, for example, you got 1,000 plants to pot. All right, great. Here's the task for the week. Pot 1,000 plants. Maybe you can do that in a day. Maybe you can do it in 2 or 3 days. Let's just say you're going to do that during the course of a week. While you were potting, it started raining. That ran you inside. You don't have a good place to work that's not inside, and it wound up taking up half the day or more. The next thing you know, it's dark and you've lost a good chunk of the day's work, and you thought you would have had at least 200 done today, and it turns out you got 30 done today. Well, sometimes that's just the way it is. Or let's say that you were going to take 2 or 3 days to build yourself a new shade house, and you've watched videos on how to build a shade house, and you're like, hey, I'm going to build one of those shade houses like Savvy Dirt Farmer's shade house, and it doesn't take that long. And it turns out that you're just not as good with a drill and with a hammer and with tools as you thought you might be, and instead of it taking 3 days, it wound up taking 3 weeks. And let's say that because you're new at farming, you really weren't sure how long it was going to take for a plant to get ready to sell. You didn't know if it was going to take 6 weeks or 6 months or a year or more. You weren't sure, but you thought surely it wouldn't take that long, and the next thing you know, it's taken that plant 2 years to get to the size that you thought it was going to be in much less time. Listen, things just take time. Sometimes you have a very pleasant surprise with this, and you'll say, hey, that didn't take as long as I thought it would, or you'll have great surprises like I had this year when all of these plants grew a lot faster than I thought they were going to. Sometimes it works out that way, but sometimes it doesn't. And you need to plan for that. You need to assume that things are going to take longer than you think. And if you wind up having extra time because you came out to the good, then all the better. Get something else done. And a final tip that I would like to share that we've learned on our first year of farming is make sure that you don't get in over your head financially. Now, when I say this, the way that we have chosen to run our business is 100% debt-free. I mean, everything that we have, everything that we're growing, everything that is our business up to this point, it has come as a result of just reinvesting and reinvesting and reinvesting our money back into our business. Listen, guys, don't take the big gamble and the risk associated with taking out big loans on perishable products. Listen, here, kind of the blessing and the curse of growing plants in a nursery is something like this. The blessing of it is that you're dealing with a very rapidly appreciating asset or commodity. So let's say that you want to grow some vegetable plants from seed. Cool. All right, so you plant those seeds, and those seeds are just worth a few cents each. Let's say they're worth 10 cents each. Let's say that you plant a 10-cent seed, and in 8 weeks, that is going to be worth a minimum of $2. Maybe it's worth $3. It just depends on where you live and how much you're going to sell your plants for. But you're talking about a commodity that increased 20 or 30 times in value in 2 months. I mean, I don't know what else in the world does that. I'm sure there is something, and you feel free to let me know. But plants are rapidly increasing commodities in value. And as such, we can get real starry-eyed and we can get real excited about, oh, I'm just going to borrow a bunch of money and sink it into these plants and it's going to 20x in 8 weeks. No way does it work like that. Plants can and will and do die. Pests are real. Weather is unpredictable. Your dog will destroy stuff. Your customers, for whatever reason, will not want what you're offering. You won't be able to sell it. There are so many things that can and do go wrong when you're trying to sell anything. So it's just something that you need to be aware of. People are always going to buy plants. There's always going to be a need for plants and agricultural products of any kind. People are going to always need them. There's going to always be a demand for them. You don't have to create demand. There is demand. But it is very unwise to just assume that you're going to get this big return on your money just because you did last year, or just because somebody else that you heard of did really well with them, or whatever it is. The best thing that you can do is cash flow your business. Let it stand on its own merit. Let it stand on its own 2 feet. And it's going to be a whole lot less stressful. There's going to be a whole lot less risk involved. And you're going to be able to go to work every day knowing that, you know, if something goes bad today, we're going to be all right. If things don't work out as well as we wanted to this season, we're going to be all right. And there's just something calming. There's something peaceful about knowing that you don't owe your profits from your plants or your proceeds from your plants, that you don't owe it back to a bank. So don't get in over your head financially, whatever that looks like for you. It's going to vary person to person. pay attention to what you're doing with your money in your business. So guys, these are just some things that we've learned this year. Some of them really kind of common sense and maybe things that we already knew, and some of them are things that we really didn't know or that we just really got sharpened up on a lot this year where we said, hey, this really makes sense now. So guys, like always, I appreciate you watching. I love y'all, and I'll see you on the next one.